Before Pompeii became a whisper buried beneath ash, it was alive. Not just alive, radiant. In the early morning, the city woke slowly, as if stretching under the warmth of the southern sun. The first sound wasn't fear or warning or the trembling of the earth. It was the gentle clatter of shutters opening, the splash of water from fountains carved centuries before, the rhythmic footsteps of vendors rolling carts toward the forum. Pompeii breathed with an ease that only prosperous cities know. Its streets were drawn with geometric perfection, paved by the hands of engineers who believed Rome's power could tame even nature. Villas opened onto courtyards filled with marble statues and pools that reflected fragments of sky. Merchants displayed fabrics dyed in brilliant reds and purples. Bakers pulled loaves from brick ovens, their crust crackling in the cool air. Perfumes drifted from small shops, mixing with the smell of goats, oils, and damp earth. People believed life would always be like this, orderly, predictable, eternal. Children chased each other through the streets, weaving between columns as if the city were their playground. Women gathered near fountains, their bracelets tinkling softly as they filled clay jugs with fresh water. Men discussed politics in the barbershops, cursing distant senators while slaves swept mosaic floors depicting gods with calm eyes. And above all of it, Vesuvius. But no one feared it. They loved it. It was a green mountain, tender with vineyards, dotted with farms. A quiet guardian whose slopes yielded the sweetest grapes, the richest soil. People praised the mountain in their prayers. They left offerings at small shrines. No one imagined it as a threat. A volcano, perhaps to ancient legends, but not to Pompeii. To them, the mountain was a father. Generous, constant, kind. Yet beneath its green skin, something was stirring. For months, there had been signs, odd vibrations underfoot, dogs howling at night, water levels shifting in wells. Some old fishermen whispered that the mountain was breathing strangely. A few priests noticed cracks forming in the walls of their temples. But life is stubborn, and people cling to normality with astonishing strength. They swept the cracks away, laughed at the tremors, ignored the uneasy silence that sometimes hovered over the vineyards. After all, Pompeii was powerful. Pompeii was Roman. Pompeii could not fall. And so the city continued to live, unaware that time was shortening around it like a tightening rope. The day destiny arrived. Nothing looked unusual. The morning sun spilled gold across the tiled rooftops. Women hung laundry from balconies, sheets fluttering like white birds. Merchants opened their doors. Children argued over wooden toys. A group of travelers entered the city gates, brushing off dust from the road. Everything felt ordinary. Everything felt invincible. Pompeii did not know that it was walking toward its last day. Not toward war, not toward famine, but toward nature's oldest and most merciless truth. Nothing built by humans lasts forever. When Vesuvius finally opened its throat, the world would learn this lesson in fire. But for now, Pompeii danced through its final sunrise in innocence, a heartbeat away from an apocalypse no one could imagine. It was late morning when everything changed. There was no sign, no warning carried by wind or whisper. Pompeii moved through the heat of the day as it always had. Shoppers haggled in the marketplace. Priests tended incense in temples. Farmers returned from the fields with baskets of figs and olives. Children splashed near fountains, laughing as the water glimmered under the sun. Then the earth exhaled. A deep vibration rolled under the city, so low it felt like the ground itself growled. Amphorae rattled. A few tiles slid from rooftops. The tremor lasted only seconds, but for a moment, all of Pompeii froze. People paused, looked around, waited. Then the city resumed. Life continued. Routine overcame fear. But beneath the mountain, pressure that had been building for centuries found the weakness it needed. At 1 p.m., the first roar came. It was not thunder. It was not wind. It was the sound of the earth breaking. The noise erupted from Vesuvius with such force that birds exploded from the trees in a black cloud. Goats stumbled on the slopes. Every dog in the city began barking at once, as if begging their masters to listen. Then, with a violence no one alive had ever seen, the top of the mountain tore open. A column of ash shot into the sky, straight, massive, monstrous. Not smoke, not dust. A towering spear of blackened fire hurled upward with the fury of creation itself. The people of Pompeii stopped in the streets. Mothers clutched their children. Men shielded their eyes. Slaves dropped their baskets and ran. No one moved at first. No one could understand. The sky began to darken, not slowly, not gently, but as if an enormous curtain were being pulled across the heavens. The blue faded into gray, then into brown, then into a thick, suffocating black. Some thought it was the end of the world. Some thought the gods were punishing them. Some thought it was rain. It wasn't rain. It was the beginning. Small grains, light and white, like snowflakes of stone, began to fall. Pumice, soft at first, harmless. People stepped outside and caught them in their hands. Children laughed at the strange ashes drifting through the air. But the fall grew thicker, larger, heavier. Soon the stones struck hard enough to sting, then hard enough to bleed, then hard enough to break. The sound of falling pumice became a drumroll across the tiled roofs. Thousands of impacts per second. The sky turned into a storm of rock. Within an hour, the streets were covered ankle-deep. Another hour, knee-deep. Another, waist-deep. Roofs began to sag under the growing weight. Wooden beams moaned. Walls trembled. People fled into the streets, burying their heads, clutching their families. Others barricaded themselves inside, shoving furniture against doors, praying the roofs would hold. The ash was everywhere. In the air, in the lungs, in the eyes. Breathing became painful. Sight became difficult. Movement became a battle. The world had become a gray maze of falling stone. And Vesuvius roared again, louder, deeper, closer. A sound so immense, it felt like the sky was cracking open. Pompeii's people looked up in terror. What they saw was not a mountain anymore. It was a black giant, crowned in fire, pulling the day into night. And they did not yet know. This was just the beginning. By mid-afternoon, the sky was gone. Not covered, not darkened, erased. Pompeii lay under a choking twilight, a world without sun. The falling pumice thickened into a steady, relentless cascade. Every rooftop echoed with the hammering of stones. Every breath tasted of grit and sulfur. People staggered through the streets, shielding their heads with bowls, shields. Even wooden doors ripped from hinges. Mothers wrapped their children in cloaks, whispering comfort they did not believe. But the rain of stone only grew heavier. The elegant villas, symbols of Pompeii's pride, were the first to collapse. Their courtyards filled with white ash. Their painted frescoes cracked under the pressure. Marble floors disappeared beneath the weight of mountains that fell from the sky. Inside the bathhouses, the once steaming pools turned into pale basins of ash. Temples lost their columns. Shops buckled inward. Roof tiles crashed down like falling knives. Screams filled the alleys. Some ran toward the countryside. Some toward the port. Some simply froze, unable to choose between dangers they couldn't see. But the ash did not care about choices. With every passing minute, it climbed higher. Feet, knees, hips. People waded through it like through a rising flood, except this flood choked instead of drowned. Breaths grew shorter, voices hoarse, eyes red and burning. The city's wells began to clog. fountains sputtered and died. The familiar sounds of Pompeii, vendors, children, wagons, vanished beneath a blanket of falling stone. Some citizens huddled in their homes, believing thick walls would save them. They lit lamps, only to see the flames shrink as oxygen dwindled. Wet cloths were pressed against faces. Doors were barred. Families embraced in dim rooms, filled with prayers. Others made desperate attempts to climb onto rooftops, hoping to escape the rising ash. But roofs were no refuge. One by one, they caved in with terrible cracks, burying entire households beneath tons of stone. The air grew hotter, thicker, more poisonous. Those still outside staggered like shadows. Those inside struggled in suffocating darkness. Yet the worst had not begun. As afternoon turned to evening, the eruption shifted. Vesuvius, now raged open at its core, had expelled so much material that the towering column of ash above it began to collapse in on itself. This was nature's most terrifying transformation, the birth of the pyroclastic surge, a monstrous cloud of burning gas and ash, denser than air, folding downward like a tsunami made of fire. It gathered speed. It grew hotter. It spread in all directions, rolling over the slopes like a living beast. But Pompeii could not see it. The city was buried in darkness, blind to the killer coming down the mountain. In the Forum, people tried to flee, slipping in the thickening ash. Statues disappeared beneath the gray. The wind carried an endless howl punctured by collapsing beams. And somewhere in the distance, a deep, violent rumble began to rise, a sound unlike anything the city had ever heard. Low, hungry, unstoppable. The mountain was preparing its final blow, and for Pompeii, the last hour of life had begun. Evening never arrived. It was swallowed. Pompeii stood in a darkness so absolute it felt supernatural. Lamps flickered and died. Voices thinned into coughing. The weight of ash pressed on every roof, every street, every breath. And then it came. A roar split the air. Not like thunder, not like wind, but like a mountain screaming. The pyroclastic surge had broken free. A boiling wave of ash, gas, and pulverized rock shot down Vesuvius at 300 kilometers per hour, hotter than 700 degrees, fast as fate itself. It did not glide. It hunted. Across vineyards, across farms, across the silent countryside. It roared toward Pompeii like a living shadow made of fire. Inside the city, no one saw it coming. They only heard the sound. That impossible, crushing sound, and felt the ground tremble beneath their feet. Some ran, some froze, some prayed. But the cloud was already at the gates. It hit the city in an instant. There was no time to understand. No time to scream. No time even to draw a final breath. For those outside, death was immediate. The heat so intense it contracted muscles and broke bones before the mind could register fear. For those inside homes, the surge slipped through windows and doorframes, like a killer made of smoke, filling rooms faster than people could rise to their feet. And in that instant, time stopped. Bodies collapsed exactly as they were. A mother curled around her child, a man shielding his face, a dog straining against its chain, a young woman clutching a necklace. The flesh vanished, but the positions remained, sealed in ash, preserved in silence, as if 1,000 gestures had been captured in one eternal moment. Pompeii, a city of festivals, markets, music, laughter, became a city of statues. The pyroclastic flow swept through the homes, through the baths, through the temples, through the forum. And then it moved on, racing toward the sea. Those who tried to flee toward the port were overtaken on the open road, their bodies lying where their hopes fell. By the next morning, the city had vanished completely, buried under 6 meters of ash and stone, hidden, erased, silenced. For centuries, The fields above Pompeii flourished. Grapes grew, olive trees spread, farmers plowed the soil, never knowing an entire world slept beneath their feet. Rome fell. New empires rose. Centuries turned like pages. Pompeii remained frozen, the day of its death perfectly preserved.